But I would argue that the vast majority of people voted for their values. And bringing it back to relationships, can we have some empathy for our friends? Can we try to see their vote as a reflection of their values and not some attack to you and your values? Can we do that? If you've been friends with someone, at some point you had some common ground. Can you look for that in the midst of what feels very divisive? Can you look to that empathy? That's just my invitation to all of us. Welcome to Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karen Anderson Abril here with my co-host,
Pastor Elliot Anderson.
And Love and Life is your place to hear conversations grounded in psych research, psychotherapy,
and biblical truth
to help us thrive in love and life. Hey there, I wanted to come on and talk about some things that are related to relationships and also related to the unique time that we are living in, which is post-election. And I'm noticing some of what I might call post-election stress disorder, which is warranted. It makes sense. Politics are rooted in our values, and we make decisions regarding our choices based on things that we care deeply about. And so for some folks, this is a very painful time and they're reeling. And for other folks, they are feeling some relief. And it's complex because for many of us, and I'm sure you're in that boat, we have people we love dearly who see things very differently in this time. So I wanted to just address a couple of things. We're seeing a lot of division, obviously. There was the call for unity. I think both candidates claimed that they would be wanting to lead in unity for all Americans, and yet we don't feel that on a very visceral level. We don't feel that. We feel alienated if we're on the other side of things. And the division is coming out from even from experts and professionals in the field of mental health saying, yeah, you may need to cut off those people. And if you voted for Kamala and you have Trump voting family members, maybe you don't invite them to Thanksgiving. We're hearing some of this from, again, professionals. So it's troubling to me because I don't think that the way to move through this time benefits any of us if we all believe at some level we want unity to go into emotional cutoff, which is what we are seeing being instructed, many people instructing people to do this. And Elliot and I will speak about that later in another episode because I want to get into the family systems research on emotional cutoffs and how they actually, in fact, aren't helpful in the vast majority of times. Sometimes we have to because there's been rampant abuse. So that's legitimate, of course. But to emotionally cut someone off who has loved you as a family member for years and years and years because they made a different choice in the voting booth is not, according to many researchers and psychological orientations, it's not a plan for health and for thriving in love and life, which is what we're trying to do here. The division has taken a very men versus women stance in some cases. We've got this 4B movement where women are saying, I'm not going to date men anymore. I'm going to not get married. I won't have their babies. And this comes from, I think, this notion that women voted for Kamala, men, I guess statistically, there were more men who voted for Trump. And so to punish men, women are saying, I won't be in partnership with you. As someone who's always, I used to do a lot in the dating relationship space, and I was always trying to encourage us to see the best in each other and certainly protect ourselves from what could be hurtful. But an all-out lumping all men as evil, it's a very rigid way of conceptualizing your world and the opposite sex. So that troubles me. We've also seen this blue bracelet movement, which is white women saying, I'm going to wear a blue bracelet to signify to other white women that I'm safe because I also voted for Kamala, not like those evil white women who betrayed women, Black women, women of color, white women who voted for Trump apparently betrayed all other women by voting for this misogynist and this convicted, whatever he's been convicted of. I don't think all of those lawsuits were legitimate. But anyway, there's this whole hate half of the women around you. This is just troubling. It's just very disconcerting as someone who values relationships, and what Elliot and I do is trying to help build and cultivate and strengthen relationships. This is obviously something I just wanted to speak to for a few minutes. As you know, we've been partnering with the Wellness Company for several months now. And personally, as someone who sadly no longer trusts the vast majority of medical professionals, I am so happy to be able to share the Wellness Company's array of products with the Love and Life community. Dan and I just purchased the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit, which includes vital medications with proven safety profiles like ivermectin, amoxicillin, and Z-Pak. The kit also includes a comprehensive guidebook researched and written by the company's chief medical board, including esteemed doctors who stood up to COVID tyranny, by the way, which is exactly why they've earned our trust. Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and Dr. Paul Alexander, just to name a few. Head over to twc.health/lovelife and enter promo code LOVELIFE, all one word, for 15% off your order. That's twc.health/lovelife and promo code LOVELIFE for 15% off your order. We can take charge of our health, and the Wellness Company is here to help us do it. So I did this reel recently, and I want to share it here, and then I'll share with you some of the responses that I got. So take a look at the reel. Just want to check in on how everyone's doing. There's been a lot of conversation, it seems like, at least online, about cutting people out of your life if they voted for Trump and you voted for Kamala. It's affecting dating relationships. It's affecting how women feel about men in their lives. It's affecting how people feel about family members. Deep, loving friendships are being strained. So just wanted to see if this is something you guys are experiencing, and we're going to cover it on the podcast, but I want to get some feedback from what you're going through to inform me as Elliot and I talk about this. And like I said, let me just first start with a couple of the responses I got. One woman said, I don't like discussing politics for this exact reason. We don't need to agree on everything to be friends and family. But to stop speaking to people because of who you voted for sounds like people have deeper issues in their life than politics. And I do think that could be the case. I think that this could be a manifestation of other concerns. Maybe you've always had some frustration with this friend or family member, and this was just the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. Or maybe you're looking for an excuse just to cut people out of your life or to be angry. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be going on. But again, I'm looking for ways to bridge and to move through, unified, and at least finding common ground in some realms. Of course, we're not going to align on everything. If we align on everything, we would have all voted the same way. But I also see that there's this lack of empathy. And that's something else I wanted to speak to is I was having some conversations with a friend, my one friend who will talk to me about such things. And I got the sense, and I was asking her, trying to get the sense that my vote seemed to be a vote against concerns that she has and people that she cares for, as opposed to a vote for my values. And so we were trying to work that out. And I was trying to offer my point of view, which is I voted, as you all know, who've listened to the last couple episodes, I voted as someone who's been deeply concerned about medical health freedom, who has always been skeptical of pharma. Again, I'll just remind everyone that was my Democrat, liberal father, college professor who told me never to trust these big businesses and these big entities, and in particular pharma, because when I was first getting my degree in clinical psych and I came home and I'm like, Dad, there's this new miracle drug. It's called Prozac and it's going to cure depression. He was like, yeah, right. And so he was the one who taught me that pharma has more of an obligation to their shareholders to make money for them as opposed to actually curing and helping people, even though that seems so cynical. But it's just being wise and understanding the realities of big corporations. And you guys know I've been very uh, irate, actually, by the influence of pharma in psychology and in psychotherapy over the last 40 years, and before that even, but particularly in the last 30 and 40 years, where we now tell anyone who has an emotion that they don't really love that, oh, it's just a chemical imbalance. And I think that's the most dehumanizing, most cruel way, lack of empathy, in fact, to tell someone that, well, it's not that you have a reason to feel distress and grief and pain. It's that your neurons are just misfiring. Those dang neurotransmitters are getting screwed up. That, I think that's completely unloving. And it's a very simplistic, and it's a very, to my mind, disempowering way to explain, oh yeah, you just got a screwed up brain, it's broken, and it's always going to be like that. To me, that's like the least helpful thing you could tell someone who's going through what is probably a very reasonable and rational reaction to the complexities of life. So getting back to why I voted the way I did, when the MAHA movement joined the MAGA movement, it was a no-brainer for me because I had followed Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s work, and he's been a fearless fighter for medical freedom, for challenging pharma, for looking at the regulatory capture of the FDA and the CDC, and the fact that pharma funds so much of their own research and then says, hey, our study found that this drug worked perfectly. And the FDA is like, okay, great. I've been deeply troubled by this for a long time. So when there was a glimmer of hope that we could get someone in a position of power to take it to the establishment, there was no question for me. Now, that was a vote for my values that I have held since I was a young girl living in my father's home. So to frame my vote as an act against my sisters, women who had their own reasons for voting in the manner that they did, it was not about that. It wasn't even crossing my mind. My vote was for my values. And to flip it on its from the other side, when friends voted for Kamala, who was second in command during the COVID tyranny, she was second in command during these mandates. She was second in command when I was fearful that as someone who was unvaccinated, that I would lose privileges, which I did for 8 months, couldn't even get a cup of coffee or a dinner in the home, Chicago, which I called home for 15 years. Kamala was second in command. So to align with her values on something that was, to me, tyrannical, that I experienced personally, there was no way I was going to vote for that or for her. I don't see my friends who voted for her as aggressively coming at me and my health freedom. I know that they weren't in the ballot booth going, yeah, I hope that Karen feels the tyrannical experience again. I hope she's traumatized by COVID again. I hope we do. And that wasn't what was on their radar. So can we remember that our friends and loved ones have their values and they voted for their values? I would say that most people did not vote against. Now, I think probably some people did just vote for Kamala because they hated Trump so much. There could have been some of those votes. And there might have been some, there are some misogynists out there. Maybe there were people who were just like, I don't see a woman being in power. And so they voted for Trump more because they were against Kamala. That happens I'm sure in some cases. But I would argue that the vast majority of people voted for their values. And bringing it back to relationships, can we have some empathy for our friends? Can we try to see their vote as a reflection of their values and not some attack to you and your values? Can we do that? If you've been friends with someone, at some point you had some common ground. Can you look for that in the midst of what feels very divisive? Can you look to that empathy? That's just my invitation to all of us. I want to share another reflection that someone shared, a response. This woman says, as a mental health counselor, I see this as so unhealthy. It's one thing if your family is toxic and abusive towards you, but to encourage people to cut people out of their lives because they do not do what you want them to do is such a very concerning precedent and looks more like manipulation and coercion than self-care. I've yet to work with a client on either side who voted based on hate. Most people are good at the core and want to only do what is best for themselves and their families. The media is brainwashing people and cutting them off from their families. And I concur with her assessment. I was so glad to hear another person in the mental health space talk about what I just said, that people are voting for their deeply held values and beliefs and passions. They are typically not voting in a hateful manner. So I was really thankful for that comment, and also concerned that the media is presenting us. There's a lot of fear mongering that goes on both sides, and we have all kind of gone to our corners with which media sources we trust. Many of us have left the establishment media entirely. I primarily listen to podcasts. I mean, not just Elliot's and mine. I listen to other podcasts when I get my politics. And typically, as someone who has been on the other side, I voted for Obama. I'm someone who really appreciates people who are willing to step out of their camp. So a lot of podcasters like Russell Brand I listen to, because he stepped away from, he was on the left, and now he wouldn't consider himself on the right. He's just an open thinker and open to all points of view. And he won't be pigeonholed into, I must think this way because I have identified as this ideology. And same with Glenn Greenwald, is a brilliant mind. He just refuses to be, he considers himself, I'm sure he considers himself on the left. Jimmy Dore, we're going to actually see him. He's a comic, and he does some political commentary as well. He's almost a socialist, but he is for free speech. I mean, again, so many of these values that used to be on the left and now are, a lot of people feel politically homeless. And I think that's actually a good thing, because I don't think that these rigid camps that we align into are helpful, again, for the whole process of connection and unity. And speaking of rigidity, I want to also bring to the conversation the fact that when we are so rigid in our thinking and in our mindset, we really are stepping into what cognitive therapists call cognitive distortions. So they're thought patterns that don't serve us, and they keep us, and there's a ton of research on this. Cognitive behavioral therapists, in fact, would encourage us, if we went to see a cognitive behavioral therapist and we started speaking with these cognitive distortions in this manner, they would remind us that these are all related to depression and anxiety. So the more that we lock into this rigid thinking, and I'm talking about catastrophizing. A lot of people right now feel like the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Like the worst possible thing is going to happen. The worst possible scenario they can imagine is for sure going to happen. That kind of thinking is related to depression and anxiety. So we might want to consider what we've learned from cognitive behavioral therapy and try to identify some of our thoughts that may be irrational. I'm not saying they're reasonable, but are they rational? I mean, it's understandable that you have these thoughts and feelings, but are they rational, and are they going to serve you? So we could look into Albert Ellis's work, and I'll do some posts about this, and Elliot and I will talk about this more in the future episodes. But these cognitive distortions, they don't serve us. Now, I mean, it's fine to be in a space where you're like, I don't care. This is what I feel, and I'm just going all in. Okay, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life or how to you do you, but I can share as a psychologist what the research shows and what therapists have seen over the years can be beneficial for helping us feel more peace, feel more centered, feel more grounded. And if we're interested in maintaining relationships that feel very polarized right now, these are tools that can help us. Another is all or nothing thinking. And that's, again, when we're painting our friends as, well, you voted for Trump, so you were all bad. Forgetting all those good times you had together, those girls' trips you went on, the laughs you've had, the way that you supported each other through painful times in the past. Doesn't matter. It's all over and done. Or that family member who voted for Kamala and that was just against your values. Now you forget all the times that you guys had great holidays together and spent family reunions together. That person is dead to you. This all or nothing thinking. It's not loving. It's not empathic. And it's not self-serving. It's not even going to help you. You'll just be stewing and ruminating in your hate and your pain and wallowing. And if you want to chill out in that space for a while, okay. But I personally wouldn't recommend it. I'm not trying to minimize your pain. I really am not. I know people are feeling very scared, very marginalized. And again, I can speak to COVID. I was marginalized in COVID. I'm not trying to play the victim card. I'm not. I have tons of privilege all over the place. Biggest privilege I had was being born to two parents in a loving family and raised to know Jesus. But I'm not trying to minimize anything. I'm also trying to offer an invitation to look to what can help us. We have episodes about ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, that looks at how we can move through painful situations. Also, that's a third generation cognitive therapy. So if cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't suit you, you might look at Stephen C. Hayes' research or his orientation ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. References, I can refer you to that. I think would be helpful. Let me read one as I close. One more comment that I really loved. It was really beautiful. This person says, thank you for addressing this. When people are very passionate about political issues, it's typically because they care deeply about people. And they have simply reached different conclusions about how to best help people or which people to help. I hope you can help some people find peace and ways to maintain positive relationships. And that is my heart too. I want to thank you for that comment. It touched me. And I hope that this can be received in a way that feels that is my intention. It is my intention, but I also know that sometimes we offer something and it doesn't land in the way that we intended it to land and we hoped that it would land. So I recognize it may not. But please know, for any of you who have been with Love and Life in our community for a while, please know where this is coming from and how I'm hoping it will land. I believe we can do this. I believe that we can all be maybe perhaps even pleasantly surprised that someone like RFKJ, I asked my friend, she had me listen to something by AOC, and I asked her to listen to RFKJ's speech when he suspended his campaign and took Maha to join MAGA. And it was such a beautiful speech. It touched me deeply. And I would suggest maybe when you're done with grieving, maybe look to trying to be open to the possibility that there might be something good that could come out of this, even if it wasn't the administration you voted for. And again, for those of us who did vote for Trump and for Maha and MAGA, I guess I offer this when someone comes at you, maybe wanting to cut you off or dismiss and see your choice as being completely an attack on them and their values. I hope maybe framing it as, can we think about, we each have our values. And as this individual said, that we both have people that we care about and want to help. And we saw different ways to help these people. We saw that the road to that, the trajectory to that help in a different manner, and it necessitated a different vote. But I offer that. I hope it's helpful. I love you guys. I believe we can get through this and stay strong and find that common ground again. So thanks for listening and have a great week.
Love and Life with Dr. Karen and Pastor Elliot is produced by Tim May and executive producer Dr. Karen Anderson-Abel. For more information about Love and Life, please go to loveandlifemedia.com.